Shalom and good afternoon. Today we're going to start reading in the book of Joshua or Yahu'sha, chapter 9. And it came to be when all the sovereigns who were beyond the Jordan, in the hills, and in the low country, in all the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite, and the Amorite, the Canaanite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Yebusite heard. They gathered together to fight with Yahu'sha and Yashrael with one accord. And the inhabitants of Gabon heard what Yahu'sha had done to Yero and Ai. And they acted slyly and went and pretended to be envoys, and they took old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins from torn and mended, and an old patched sandals on their feet, and old garments on themselves. And all the bread of their provision was dry. It was crumbs. And they went to Yahu'sha to the camp at Gilgal and said to him and to the men of Yashrael, we have come from a far land, and now make a covenant with us. But the men of Yashrael said to the Hivites, it would be that you dwell in our midst, so how would we make a covenant with you? And they said to Yahu'sha, we are your servants. And Yahu'sha said to them, who are you, and where do you come from? So they said to him, from a land very far off. Your servants have come because of the name of Yahu'ah your Eluah. For we have heard the report of him and all that he did in Mistrium, and all that he had done to the two sovereigns of the Amorites, and who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, sovereign of Heshbon, and Og, sovereign of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our land spoke to us, saying, take food with you for the journey, and go to meet them, and say to them, we are your servants, and now make a covenant with us. This bread of ours we took hot for our provision from our houses on the day that we left to come to you. But now see, it is dry and is crumbly. And these wineskins which we filled were new, and see, they are torn. And these are garments, and our sandals have become old because of the very long journey. And the men of Yashrael took some of their food, but they did not ask the word of Yahu'ah. And Yahu'sha made peace with them, and made a covenant with them to let them live. And the rulers of the congregation swore to them. And it came to be at the end of 3 days, after they had made a covenant with them, that they heard that they were their neighbors who dwelt near them. And the children of Yashrael departed and came to their cities. And on the 3rd day, now their cities were Gibeon and Kephirah and Beroth and Kirath Yearim. But the children of Yashrael did not smite them, because the rulers of the congregation had sworn to them by Yahu'ah Eluah of Yashrael. And all the congregation grumbled against the rulers. But all the rulers said to all the congregation, we have sworn to them by Yahu'ah Eluah of Yashrael, and we are unable to touch them now. Let us do this to them. We shall keep them alive lest wrath be upon us because of the oath which we swore to them. And the rulers said to them, Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and drawers of water for all the congregation, as the rulers had promised them. Then Yahu'sha called for them, and he spoke to them, saying, Why have you deceived us, saying, We were very far from you, yet you are dwelling in our midst? And now you have cursed, now you are cursed, and you shall not cease from being slaves, and woodcutters and drawers of water for the house of my Yahu'ah. And they answered Yahu'sha and said, Your servants were clearly told that Yahu'ah your Yahu'ah commanded his servant Moshe to give you all the land, and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land before you. So we were very much afraid for our lives because of you, and have done this deed. And now see, we are in your hands. Do with us as it seems good and right to do to us. And he did so to them, and delivered them out of the hand of the children of Yisrael, and they did not kill them. In that day Yahu'sha made them woodcutters and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of Yahu'ah, even to this day, in that place that he should choose. Chapter 10. And it came to be when Adoni Sedek, sovereign of Jerusalem, heard that Yahu'sha had captured Ai and had put it under the bond, that he had done to Ai in its sovereign, as he had done to Yero in its sovereign, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Yisrael and were in their midst. That they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. And Adoni Sedek, sovereign of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, sovereign of Hebron, and to Param, sovereign of Yamuth, and to Yaphia, sovereign of Lachish, and to Debir, sovereign of Eglon, saying, Come up to me and help me, and let us smite Gibeon, for it has made peace with Yahu'sha and with the children of Yisrael. So the 5 sovereigns of the Amorites, the sovereign of Jerusalem, the sovereign of Hebron, the sovereign of Yamuth, the sovereign of Lachish, and the sovereign of Eglon, gathered together and went up, they and all their armies, and camped before Gibeon, and fought against it. And the men of Gibeon sent to Yahu'sha at the camp of Gilgal, saying, Do not withdraw your hand from your servants. Come up to us quickly, and save us and help us. For all the sovereigns of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have assembled against us. And Yahu'sha went up from Gilgal, he and all the soldiers with him, and all the mighty brave men. And Yahu'ah said to Yahu'sha, Do not fear them, for I have given them into your hand. Not one of them stands before you. So then Yahu'sha came up upon them, suddenly having gone up all night from Gilgal. And Yahu'ah threw them into confusion before Yisrael, and they smote them with a great smiting at Gibeon, and pursued them along the way that goes to Bath Haran, and smote them as far as Ezekah and Makeda. And it came to be, as they fled before Yisrael, and were on the descent of Bath Haran, that Yahu'ah threw down large hailstones from the Shemayim on them as far as Ezekah, and they died. There were more who died from the hailstones than those whom the sons of Yashrael had slain with the sword. Then Yahu'sha spoke to Yahu'ah in the day when Yahu'ah gave the Amorites over to the children of Yashrael. And he said before the eyes of Yashrael, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Alion. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation averaged itself upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Yashar? Thus the sun stopped in the midst of the Shemayim, and did not hasten to go down for an entire day. And there has been no day like that before it or after it, that Yahu'ah listened to the voice of a man, because Yahu'ah fought for Yashrael. So Yahu'sha returned, and all Yashrael with him to the camp of Gilgal. Now these 5 sovereigns had fled and hidden themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And it was reported to Yahu'sha, saying, the 5 sovereigns have been found hidden in the cave of Makkedah. And Yahu'sha said, roll large stones against the mouth of the cave, and put men by it to guard them. And you do not stand still, but pursue your enemies, and you shall smite them in the rear, and do not allow them to enter their cities, for Yahu'ah your Elohim has given them into your hand. And it came to be, when Yahu'sha and the children of Yashrael had ended smiting them with a very great smiting, till they had finished, but those who escaped went into walled cities, that all the people returned to the camp, to Yahu'sha at Makkedah in peace. No one moved his tongue against any of the sons of Yashrael. Then Yahu'sha said, open the mouth of the cave, and bring out those 5 sovereigns to me from the cave. And they did so, and brought those 5 sovereigns to him from the cave, the sovereign of Jerusalem, sovereign of Hebron, the sovereign of Yarmouth, the sovereign of Lachish, the sovereign of Eglon. And it came to be, when they brought out those sovereigns to Yahu'sha, that Yahu'sha called for all the men of Yashrael, and said to them, to their chiefs of the men of the battle who went with him, come near and put your feet on the necks of these sovereigns. And they drew near and put their feet on their necks. Then Yahu'sha said to them, do not be afraid nor discouraged. Be strong and courageous, for this is what Yahu'ah is going to do to all your enemies whom you are fighting. And afterward Yahu'sha smote them and killed them, and hanged them on 5 trees, and they were hanging on the trees until evening. And it came to be at the time of the going down of the sun, that Yahu'sha commanded, and they took them down from the trees, and threw them into the cave where they had been hidden, and laid large stones against the cave's mouth to this day. And on that day Yahu'sha captured Makkedah, and he smote it with the edge of the sword, and he put its sovereign under the ban, them and all the people who were in it. He left no survivor. And he did to the sovereign of Makkedah as he had done to the sovereign of Yero. Then Yahu'sha passed over, and all Yashrael with him, from Makkedah to Libnah, and they fought against Libnah. And Yahu'ah also gave it and its sovereigns into the hand of Yashrael, and he smote it and all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword. He left no survivor in it. And he did so, and he did to its sovereign as he had done to the sovereign of Yero. Then Yahu'sha passed over, and all Yashrael went with him from Libnah to Lachish, and encamped against it, and fought against it. And Yahu'ah gave Lachish into the hand of Yashrael, who captured it on the 2nd day, and smote it, and all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, according to all that he had done to Libnah. Then Haram, sovereign of Gezer, came up to help Lachish, and Yahu'sha smote him and his people until he left them no survivor. Then Yahu'sha passed over and all Yashrael with him from Lachish to Eglon, and they encamped against it and fought against it, and captured it on that day, and smote it with the edge of the sword. And all the beings who were in it he put under the bond that day, according to all that he had done to Lachish. Then Yahu'sha went up, and all Yashrael with him, from Eglon to Hebron, and they fought against it, and captured it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and its sovereign, and all its cities, and all the people who were in it. He left no survivor, according to all he had done to Eglon, and he put it and all the people who were in it under the bond. Then Yahu'sha returned, and all Yashrael with him, to Deber, and fought against it. And he captured it and its sovereign and all the cities, and they smote them with the edge of the sword, and put all the people who were in it under the bond. He left no survivor. As he had done to Hebron, so he did to Deber, and its sovereign, as he had done also to Libnah and its sovereign. Thus Yahu'sha smote all the land, and the mountain country, and the Negeb, in the low country, in the wilderness slopes, and all their sovereigns. He left no survivor, but put them all that breathed under the bond, as Yahu'ah of Yashrael had commanded. And Yahu'sha smote them from Kadesh Barnea as far as Azah, and all the land of Goshen, even as far as Gibeon. And Yahu'sha captured all these sovereigns and their land at one time, because Yahu'ah of Yashrael fought for Yashrael. And Yahu'sha returned, and all Yashrael with him, to the camp at Gilgal. Chapter 11. And it came to be, when Jabin, sovereign of Hastor, heard that he sent to Yobib, sovereign of Madon, and to the sovereign of Shimron, and to the sovereign of and to the sovereigns who were from the north, in the mountains and in the desert plain, south of Kinneroth, and in the low country, and in the heights of Dor on the west. The Canaanites in the east and in the west, and the Amorite and the Hittite and the Pizarite and the Jebusite in the mountains, and the Hivite below Hebron in the land of Mizpah. And they went out, they and all their armies with them, as many people as numerous as the sand on the seashore, with very many horses and chariots. And all these sovereigns met together, and they came and camped together at the waters of Merom to fight against Yashrael. And Yahu'ah said to Yahu'sha, "Do not be afraid of their presence, for tomorrow about this time I am giving them all of them over to Yashrael, slain, hamstring their horses, and burn their chariots with fire." And Yahu'sha and all the soldiers with him came against them suddenly by the waters of Merom, and they fell on them. And Yahu'ah gave them into the hand of Yashrael, and they smote them and pursued them to great Sidon, and to Misrephoth and Mayim, and to the valley of Mizpah eastward, and they smote them until no survivor was left to them. And Yahu'sha did to them as Yahu'ah said to him, He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. And Yahu'sha turned back at that time and captured Hashur and smote its sovereign with the sword. And Hashur was formerly the head of all those reigns. And they smote all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, putting them under the bond. He did not leave anyone breathing. Then he burned Hashur with fire. And Yahu'sha captured all the cities of those sovereigns and all their sovereigns, and he smote them with the edge of the sword. He put them under the bond, as Moshe, the servant of Yahu'ah, commanded. However, Yashrael did not burn any cities that stood on their mounds, but Yahu'sha burned only Hashur. And all the spoil of these cities and the livestock the children of Yashrael took as booty for themselves, but they smote every man with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they did not leave anyone breathing. As Yahu'ah had commanded Moshe, his servant, so Moshe commanded Yahu'sha, and so Yahu'sha did. He did not turn aside a word of all that Yahu'ah commanded Moshe. Thus Yahu'sha took all this land, the mountain country, and all the Negeb, and all the land of Goshen, and the low country, and the desert plain, and the mountains of Yashrael and its lowlands. From Mount Halak that goes up to Seir, and as far as Baal Gad, in the valley of Lebanon, below the Mount Hamron, and he captured all their sovereigns, and smote them and killed them. Yahu'sha fought with all those sovereigns for a long time. There was not a city that made peace with the children of Yashrael except the Hivites, and the inhabitants of Gibeon. All the others they took in battle. For it was of Yahu'ah to harden their hearts, that they should come against Yashrael in battle, in order to put them under the bond, so that they might have no favor, but that he might annihilate them as Yahu'ah had commanded Moshe. And at the time Yahu'sha came and cut off the Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the mountains of Yehudah, and from all the mountains of Yashrael, Yahu'sha put them with their cities under the bond. There were none of the Anakim left in the land of the children of Yashrael, only in Azah, in Gath, and in Ashad some remained. Thus Yahu'sha took the entire land, according to all that Yahu'ah had said to Moshe. And Yahu'sha gave it as an inheritance to Yashrael according to their divisions by their tribes. And the land rested from fighting. Chapter 12. And these are the sovereigns of the land whom the children of Yashrael smote, in whose land they possessed beyond the Yarden towards the sun rising from the Wadi Amon Arnon at Mount Hamron, in all the desert plain eastward. Shahan, sovereign of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, ruling from Aurora, which is the bank of the Wadi Arnon, from the middle of that Wadi, and half Gilead, even as far as the Wadi Yadkub, the border of the children of Ammon, and the desert plain from the sea of Kinnereth eastward as far as the sea of the Arbath, the salt sea, the way to Baeth Yishemoth, and southward below the slopes of Pisgah, and the border of Og, sovereign of Bashan, who was the remnant of the Yepherites, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and ruled in Mount Hebron, and in Salcah, and in all Bashan, as far as the border of Geshurites, and the Machatharites, and the half of Gilead, as far as the border of Sihon, sovereign of Heshbon. Masha, the servant of Yahu'ah, and the children of Yashrael had smitten them, and Masha, the servant of Yahu'ah, had given it as a possession to the Reubenites, and to the Gadites, and to half the tribe of Manasseh. And these are the sovereigns of the land which Yahu'sha and the children of Yashrael smote beyond the Jordan, on the west from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon, as far as Mount Halak, that goes up to Seir, which Yahu'sha gave to the tribe of Yashrael as a possession according to their divisions. In the mountain country, and in the low country, and in the desert plain, and in the slopes, and in the wilderness, and in the Negeb, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Yeshbites, the sovereign of Yero, one, the sovereign of Ai, which is beside Beth El, one, the sovereign of Jerusalem, one, the sovereign of Hebron, one, the sovereign of Yarmuth, one, the sovereign of Lachish, one, the sovereign of Eglon, one, the sovereign of Gezer, one, the sovereign of Deber, one, the sovereign of Geder, one, the sovereign of Hormath, one, the sovereign of Ard, one, the sovereign of Libnah, one, the sovereign of Adulam, one, the sovereign of Makeda, one, the sovereign of Beth El, one, the sovereign of Tapua, one, the sovereign of Hefer, one, the sovereign of Aphek, one, the sovereign of Sharon, one, the sovereign of Medan, one, the sovereign of Hastor, one, the sovereign of Shimron, Maran, one, the sovereign of Ekshaf, one, the sovereign of Tayanak, one, the sovereign of Megiddo, one, the sovereign of Kadesh, one, the sovereign of Yokaim in Kamel, one, the sovereign of Dor in the heights of Dor, one, the sovereign of the nations of Gilgal, one, the sovereign of Tusha, one, 31 sovereigns in all.